What's up, y'all? It's your boy Melanated Master here with another book review video. Uh, you know, hashtag road to reading 1,000 books. Today I have a book called The Destruction of the Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Great book. I mean, probably definitely one of the best books that I've read on the Moors and just uh, quote unquote, so-called black civilizations, right? Moorish civilizations. So let's get straight into what this book is about. This is a phenomenal book that was composed of 15 years, either 15 or 16 years of research by Chancellor Williams, which he went to Africa with about, I want to say like over, 15 scholars. Um, if I recall right, it was like over 15. It could have been like 33 scholars, but he went to Africa with a lot of scholars to record the true history of Africa, because at the time that he was writing this book, a lot of history, obviously about black people was whitewashed, or it wasn't. It wasn't accessible. It wasn't easy to get to. So, but this book composed 15 years of research. This book breaks it all off. If you want to learn about Moorish history and all black people, if you want to learn about your true history and things the empires that we built, very recently, not even ancient, really. I'm talking like 200-300 years ago. Some of the most recent Moorish empires that fell. But this book talks about not only the great empires that the Moors had, and not just the Moors, right? This book talks about the Moors, the Thinnites, the Memphites, the Libyans, the Phoenicians, you know, and these names are all names of black people before slavery. So this book it talks about how because what a lot of people don't understand is before blacks were enslaved, white people were enslaved, or Europeans and Asians were enslaved. Back in around 1250 AD, they had something called the Great Revolt, which the Mamelukes, which were Europeans, the name Mameluke is a term to describe European or Caucasian slaves. So back then, 1250 AD, the slaves were called, or the European slaves were called Mamelukes, Mamelukes. And 1250 AD, think about that. That's not that long ago. It's 2021 right now. That's less than 1,000 years ago. And you just think about, they make it seem like that, black people been enslaved for so long, and that black people come from nothing but slavery, and the white people been running shit forever. That's how school teaches you. But yeah, 1250 AD was when the Great Revolt happened, where the Europeans slaves, which were called Mamelukes, revolted against the Arabs and the Moors that were enslaving them. It was called the Great Revolt. Happened 1250 AD. Check it up. Get this book. You'll learn more about it. But yeah, that's when things started turning around. Now, because at that time also, what a lot of people have to understand is that black people and European people were living in harmony, right? The Moors and the Europeans were living in harmony. And the Europeans and Asians became jealous of the power that the Moors had back then. So what they did was they thought in every way how to overcome the Moors, right? How to overcome these great black civilizations. And they seen and they knew that they couldn't do it by themselves. Europeans can conquer black people by themselves because they just weren't powerful enough. That black people back then were very powerful. So they thought, okay, Europeans and Asians thought, okay, since they allow us to live with them, they teach us everything. What we'll do is we'll go And this is just one big tactic that this book goes over. What they said is, we'll go. Europeans and Asians said, we will go, reproduce with the black women. And what this does is, when a European, the dominant male, uh, reproduces with, the less dominant black woman, it creates a lighter skin tone baby. And when the Europeans reproduce with the black woman and create the lighter skin tone, children, they taught the children that, which is indoctrination, right? But they taught the children that they were superior than the original blacks because they had European or Asian blood. So what is this? This is a type of psychological warfare, and it's conditioning over time. And it's very, very smart. It's very smart. You can tell that they learned from the best, the Moors. But they said, okay, since we can't conquer black people, us Europeans will reproduce with the Moorish women, have children with them. The children will come out lighter and less black, and we'll teach them that they're superior to the black original blacks. So now all of a sudden you have this war between the mixed blood Moors and the original Moors, or the original blacks, and the blacks that are a little bit lighter than them. My skin color, um, because they were taught as a child by the European fathers that they are superior because they have white blood. And this is one of the tactics that was used, one of the biggest tactics that was used to get black people to turn on black people. Another thing that this book talks about is how one of the other biggest reasons that the Moors fell, or the black people fell, or the Phoenicians fell, or all these great civilizations fell, the Ethiopians, was because we became disunified. We became egotistical, and we we became full of ourselves, and we became so blindsided that we didn't feel like we needed any other civilizations. Every civilization was for itself, and they never felt the need to come together. So that this was one of the falls, because the Europeans and Asians who were studying us to overcome us and to eventually conquer us, they seen that we had big egos, and we had a lot of pride for what we did and what we were doing at that time. So they seen that, and they used it against us. And that was one of the biggest reasons we failed, because when we were disunified and we were separated into separate civilizations, we became easier to conquer because we couldn't communicate with each other and other things. So they took advantage of that, and I mean, it took a long time though. Like, this book spans out over hundreds and hundreds of years, because that's how long it took for them to master the mind of the black civilization. And don't get me wrong, this book mentions a lot of Europeans that and Asians that stood up for black people more than the other black people stood up for themselves. That's how much that some Europeans at that time rode with us. They love black people so much that they died with them. They chose black people over their own people, Europeans. So it's European people out there that know the history and that ride like that. But you have to know your history to be able to distinguish the good and the bad. If you don't know your history, then you don't know what the hell's coming your way. But I definitely encourage people to get this book. Oh yeah, and about how the Europeans and Asians reproduce with the black Moors, the Moorish women. Um, the offspring, or the children that they taught, or that they indoctrinated to believe that they were superior because they had white blood, they were called mulattoes. And they were one of the biggest problems. And this book expands on that. The mulattoes of the Europeans and black women, the children of them, which we'll call mulattoes, were one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reasons, that you know the black empires fell, because the mulattoes See, it's kind of complex, but not really, because once you teach the mulattoes or the children that they're superior because they have Caucasian blood, right? Then other people, the original black Moors, not knowing this, they take these mulattoes into their tribes, and then their tribes become infiltrated because their fathers are teaching them to, conquer other black people. So what do you have? You have a system of puppetry back then, because you have the Europeans pulling the strings, right? The white fathers and the Caucasian fathers, they're the ones pulling the strings on their children, which are generations of the mulattoes, which are mixed Caucasian blood and Moorish blood, or black blood, who are taught to kill and to feel superior to the original, blacks, to their ancestors. So, it, it it's one hell of a scheme that was played on us, and you know, there's a lot of theory out there that says karma had a lot to do with it. And yeah, I do agree with that, because not all of the Moors were as righteous as other Moors. This book mentions, I mean, if you're a Moor, meaning if you're black these days, and you don't know much history, I definitely advise you to get this book, because this book will give you goosebumps. I'm telling you, there's a few pictures in this book. One of them being how around 325 A.D., when Alexander the Great was in his conquering, he was conquering territories in Egypt and Europe and Asia. Well, when he came over to Egypt, his men tried to get him to say, like, let's go conquer Ethiopia. The Empress of Ethiopia at that time was named Queen Candace. And in this book, there's a picture of Queen Candace on elephants, waiting for Alexander the Great to cross the border between Egypt and Ethiopia, because back then Egypt and um, Egypt and Ethiopia were actually one territory that was designated to a specific ruler. So Egypt and Ethiopia just recently became separated, or separate territories. They were, one territory. Egypt was actually called Northern Ethiopia for a very, very long time. I'm talking like it wasn't just separated until a few hundred years ago, when Alexander the Great and the Mamelukes started telling the Moors to separate themselves from the original blacks. But yeah, there's a picture in this book of Queen Candace on elephants. I'm talking about like a throne. She's on a throne on top of an elephant with with guards on the elephants too. And then you can see at the bottom, the other elephants and the other Moors at that time that are just waiting for Alexander the Great to cross the border from Egypt into Ethiopia. And in this book, it explains how Alexander the Great knew that Queen Candace was waiting for him, so he never he never crossed the border to Ethiopia, because he feared that his legacy would be tarnished because he would lose to a woman. So yeah, this book explains that. It's pretty funny to read. It's very uplifting too for Moors to read this and to just feel how great we were. You know, Queen Candace was one of the greatest, Moorish, Ethiopian, black women empresses of all time. I mean, war strategists of all time. She was that great. This book explains that. Um, I mean, this book talks about Queen Hatshepsut. She was another queen of the 18th dynasty. She's one of the greatest, Egyptian pharaohs at the time. That's another thing too. When you read this book and you think of these countries, you have to understand that a lot of these countries that are named today aren't its original names. A lot of these countries, names that we use, like Egypt, Ethiopia, all of these different names, Palestine, Sudan. These weren't the original names that the people that lived there in the past called it. These names were just now given to them. I'm talking, 2, 3, 400 years recently by the Greeks and the Romans. Um, they named these countries from what they understood them to be. Not their original names. Ethiopia means land of the burnt or land of the black. It's a lot of translations, but it always translates into dark people or black people. Same as Egypt or Kemet. I mean, they had so many different names back then that people have to realize that today's names that they use is not accurate. It's labels. Really, is what it is. It's just labels for the territories of the conquerors. Um, yeah, I mean, in this book too, there's a page in this book that talks about how because of the Moorish treaties that they have with Americans and Europeans, that all black people, all American and African black people of today should contend and contest to be Moors, to be recognized as Moors. That's the nationality that black people should have the best chance and should try to contend for is as Moors, because there's more evidence and documentation in black people being Moors than any other nationality on this planet. You can't. It's harder to prove that I'm in. I'm a king. I'm in the bloodline of the kings or the pharaohs of the Egyptian dynasty. Shit like that. It's harder to prove that, but it's easier to prove that you're Moors because they are such a known. They're such a known people to the conquerors that they can't be ignored, because the conquerors know about these treaties. The Europeans, Caucasians, Asians, they know about these treaties, and they know about the Moors. And in this book, it just basically mentions how all black people should contend to be Moors, because if you contend to be Moors, you can be recognized as Moors, and you can have all the benefits of being recognized as Moors. So yeah, I mean, this book is so good. It's about almost 400 pages, but it's well worth the read. It's well worth the read. It's well documented. It gives good sources. I mean, if you want to condense a lot of research into one book, I mean, 15 years of research. It took this man, the great Chancellor Williams, 15 years to write this book. Man, this book is phenomenal. I mean, this book is off the chain. Definitely recommend it. But yeah, that's my take on this book. I'll probably be reading this book again, to be honest with you, in the future after I read these other Moorish books. But in the future, I definitely plan on reading this book again because I'll have a lot more knowledge. And when you read books again in the future, after you gain more knowledge, you see things that you didn't see when you read it previously. So yeah, that's my take on Destruction of the Black Civilization book review by Chancellor Williams. Y'all Moors out there, keep your head up. Y'all have a great day. And it's your boy Melanated Mastery. Road to reading 1,000 books. We're well on the way. Long way to go. Long way we came. It's your boy Melanated Mastery. I'm out.